Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Mike Force Podcast. Get my buddy and special guest, Matthew Butler. Matt Butler is a retired lieutenant colonel as well as a shaman. He just wrote a book, From Green Beret to Shamanism, which I have right here. One of the first copies. It actually drops right before this podcast. I actually will put down the link to the book down below for purchase. And I'm super excited to get into it because I just came back from my iBegan experience. I want to get some reflection, talk about, even openly talk about our psilocybin journey together a little bit and tell you what I think about it and get his perspective as a technical expert in this field, but also as a spiritual. Is that the word?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, shaman's a word that I kind of struggle with because there's a lot of people out there who, in some respects, appropriately gatekeep that word, because in today's, like when the book dropped, somebody else promoted it on Instagram, and I never look at Instagram, which is part of my problem. I need to do better with my social media game. But there was a comment on there that basically said, you don't get to take a bunch of psilocybin and LSD and call yourself a shaman. And so there's a lot of that energy out there. Yeah. And it's like, so I replied very gently with, clearly you didn't get the book. Because, part two, From Green Beret is part one, to Shamanism is part two, was my journey with four different apprenticeships. And I take it very seriously, and I look at my shamanic path very much like I did my Green Beret path, right? Like I wanted to dedicate my life to being as good as I can at either of those crafts, right? So yeah, I did 4 apprenticeships, and will stay with those masters for life, learning different things from each of them. But yeah. So
spiritual leader, guide.
I don't know, man. Yeah.
It doesn't have real definitive terms.
No, it's hard. It's hard to put your finger on. And I guess what I would say is that the shamanic experience has given me some clarity and insight to the way the universe operates, I think.
Yeah, I certainly feel that way when you guided me through my experience, and then even the timing of it. It wasn't, you didn't push it on me. It took years before I even was convinced.
It's been years, yeah.
And went, I think I reached out to you. I was like, I need this, or I'm ready, or something like that. Before we get into the book, I wanted to get your insight, because I just got back from iBegan. I haven't really talked to you in detail about this, so this is our first conversation about it. I did iBegan, The Mission Within, and also 5-MeO.
Yep.
I didn't even know we were doing 5-MeO. And then I think one of the last sessions before, they said toad, and I didn't associate that with DMT.
Yeah.
Or 5-MeO DMT. And then when I found out we were doing it, I was pretty excited because I thought I did it before. And JT had kind of brought me into the spirit world with some DMT, and it wasn't what I had done at all.
Yeah.
And this was more like a near death or a death experience.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was scary. It was really hard to let go, but it was significant when you did. But I also, I guess, even with our psilocybin retreat that you put me through, you were very very serious about hey, just sit on it for a bit. And I think I know why, because it takes a while to kind of reflect and go, oh my gosh, good, bad, or indifferent. There's a process. There's a whole bunch of this. And what I've started to realize is every single different variation of this, I guess you guys would call it medicine, it gives you a different experience, and that comes with benefits and cons as well. How is that? What is that? I can't even wrap my head around that. I mean, is there one place that's like doing it all, or is this just from different parts of the world?
So, yeah, the metaphor that I use is that all of these different, and psychedelics, entheogens, medicines, sacraments, right? All those terms are interchangeable, but for me, the metaphor is a Swiss Army knife. The family of plants, those family of psychedelics, whatever label you want to use, they all have some great overlap, like a Swiss Army knife. Like you got this terrific apparatus with all these different tools. There's your overlap, but they're also very different. Meaning, like I'm not going to go and use the corkscrew to try to carve another type of tool, for example, right? Like a wooden bowl. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going to use the blade or the carving tool. So they all have some overlap in terms of some of the things they provide. Like all of them at a hero's dose level will provide you neuroplasticity. There's some neuroplasticity that's provided on a microdose too.
What is neuroplasticity for somebody who's
neuroplasticity is the idea that your brain goes back to a flexible state. And usually I don't always talk about the two together, but there's actually neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. And so there's a lot of symbiotic relationship between those two processes, because what's happening is, in addition to neurons finding new neural pathways to connect with each other, they're also growing new brain cells as well. And this is why it's such an important conversation for our community, because that is the actual cure to TBIs and CEI, right? Like when we start rewiring our brains and growing new brain cells, we're literally undoing all the trauma from the TBIs and things that we experienced.
Yeah, that was one of the major benefits, because I didn't feel like I was depressed when I went. I was angry. Really frustrated at things that were going on in my life, but I wasn't depressed. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't have any addictions, but what I did want is the benefits of like, hey, that neuroplasticity, where they say 30 to 45 days post, be very careful about implementing new habits and routines. What I mostly benefited from the Ibogaine, I think, is perspective, introspect, because it shows you a lot of what's in your head. And the therapist there said, like, you're not going to see anything outside of that.
Yeah.
Where I think psilocybin rocket shipped me into a new realm of understanding outside of myself.
True.
And both were impactful. It's weird because I've seen this in many of the guys, especially special operations guys or military guys. Tyler, Punky, some of the guys that I worked with in the Mission Within in Mexico, everyone's like on this journey to like try these different things. Do you, as a shaman, do you focus on any one specific, like, this is my thing? Or is it just generally like, hey, you're on a spiritual journey yourself, and then you're helping people guide them through the process of connecting them with the right medicine?
No, I firmly believe, and this is one of the things that my mentor taught me, is that, like, the process, again, like, of honing my craft, right, is, to me, there's so many parallels and alignments between this space and the special operations space, right? Like, sure, there's guys who move through multiple MOSs. Maybe they were a breacher, then they go and be a sniper or whatever, right? Over a long haul. But when you're first coming into it, generally speaking, guys will, on the teams, but in this space as well, get very narrowly focused on a particular medicine. Is how I believe that is the best practice and the way I was taught. So essentially, for me,
so you have a specialty.
Yeah. Okay. And so for me, that's acacia, the one that we spoke about just briefly. And so for those out there listening, like, a lot of guys are probably scratching their heads right now about acacia because I have no clue what that is. And it's like I did a ceremony with a group of veterans a couple weeks ago down in Florida, and one of the participants there had done ayahuasca, and they were saying, like afterwards they said there was no chance in hell that I would have said acacia is better than ayahuasca until now, till post ceremony, and then saying like yeah. So acacia and ayahuasca are very, very similar. They both work on the same active molecule, which is dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which you had smoked. And again, there's many, many forms of DMT. There's the base DMT. Acacia has DMT, November DMT, November Mike DMT. The toad is 5-MeO DMT.
Different breakdowns.
Yes, yeah. Like, maybe there's a carbon molecule somewhere different in the chain, right? That type of thing. It's I can't go into it like from a chemical or a chemistry perspective, but yeah, there's a family of DMT molecules. So ayahuasca, which was my first ceremony, and probably one of the more, if not the more prominent psychedelic in this space that people seem to be more fixated on. I love ayahuasca, but there was problems for me personally with wanting to serve it. Like I had a spiritual awakening that caused me to be, thankfully, very sensitive towards minorities and indigenous tribes and those traditions and cultures. And, again, a lot of people who have that same energy around the word shaman also have that same energy around just another white guy going down to the jungles and apprenticing for 6 weeks, quote unquote apprenticing for 6 weeks, and coming back and just being like,
I'm a shaman now.
Yeah, I'm a shaman now, and I'm gonna serve this medicine that isn't in my lineage, isn't in my tradition, that I have got no real depth of understanding on. So sort of through miraculous means, I met this gentleman who is what I consider my second mentor, and he serves acacia. So I kind of went down a different path, but again, very, very similar to ayahuasca in that it's DMT based. It's still a drink. It still produces a 6 to 8 hour journey. Still produces a lot of the same purging effect.
Purging, puking, and pooping.
Well, yeah, yes and no. The purge comes in a lot of different ways on most of the medicines, right? A lot of the medicines. And so you might yawn, you might cry, you might sing, you might laugh, you might be too hot, too cold. Your body might want to move.
Oh, that's considered a purge too.
That's purge too. Okay. Yeah. But the ones that people tend to associate with the word purge is the vomiting or shitting or vomiting while shitting. I've had that pleasure, Yeah. In Colombia, I went down. That's my other mentor. Is I have they're called taitas in Colombia, but there's a taita that I visit in Colombia, and he'll just kind of point at you and say, "Okay, Mateo, like dos, tres, cuatro," meaning it's time for your second, third, or fourth cup.
Yeah. And
a ceremony there will last between around 12 hours. We'll go from sundown to sun up. And at one point, he, Mateo, and I get up and go over there, and he gave me a special brew, I guess, because I spent the next 6 hours on the toilet. I couldn't get up. Like, I couldn't have gone 30 seconds away from that toilet. And a lot of people, have a lot of resistance to that. But I have to say, like, to me, the purging is almost maybe one of the most primary reasons we do these medicines. Like, there's a great book out there called The Body Keeps the Score. Mm-hmm. And, it's the science behind how we store up these energies in our lives as we go throughout life, right? All the trauma, the addiction, the illness, all the things. If we don't have ways of getting rid of that, it just stays in your body. You're carrying around this toxic energy. And again, like, scientifically proven. Like, I'll give you one of the quick ones in the book. They took a group of mice, and they would introduce a smell, and then they would shock them, right? And then 3 generations removed, having not given them the second, third, and fourth generation that smell or the electric stimuli until they got to the 4th generation, and then they introduced that smell, and those mice had the same reaction that their great-grandparents had.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, and
genetics.
Right, and it wasn't passed down. Like it skipped, the in-between generations.
Wow.
And that's and so that's how like trauma works in us. And so when we come along, like there's a lot of things that happen in psychedelic space. And I tell people that at a minimum, there's 3 things that you will get from this, right? Number 1 is you'll get a reset. You're just going to feel 30 pounds lighter because you're not carrying around like that, right? Number 2 is the neuroplasticity, neurogenesis of it all, which again, I'm glad to hear that your facilitators at the Journey Within talked about that 35, 40-day reset, right? And not making any new habits that you're not, like I say it this way, because we do a similar integration on that morning of, and we say it like this. We say it like, it's your greatest opportunity and your greatest warning right now. Because whatever seed you're going to sow will be sown in very fertile soil. So be very careful, very mindful about what you embrace over the next 30 days. We also tell people no major life decisions in the next 30 days. If you feel like you need to sell everything and move to Bali and open an ashram, terrific. Maybe sit with that for 30 days. Don't do that on day 1, right? Like sit with that. And then the third thing that people get from it is that purge, like having, letting go of all of that. Because really that's the source of our illness and our disease, right? Is we're carrying all that, and it just manifests in all these different ways, like as in illnesses. Yeah,
when you see like, I don't know why it just comes to mind, but like drunk people puking, often that triggers them mourning and crying and in a depressive state because they're purging something, and that activates some trigger.
Yeah. And
psychologically, I think it did that for me in Ibogaine because I purged a lot. I only purged once, I think, in psilocybin, but felt like I had to purge a lot more. But I was sweating and crying and laughing, and it was just a super emotional ride. I think, I don't want to be definitive about this, but I just have a feeling that, if people have their thing when it comes to finding a medicine that kind of works with them, I think there's a purpose to it all, or to them all. But I do feel like psilocybin, and of all the things that I've done, brought me more, not clarity, but just awareness to everything.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about talking to you about Acacia.
Yeah.
Because, when you listen to the ceremonies experience from other guys that I've talked to, it's really scary. It sounds scary. Like, pooping and, smearing it on your face and like talking in tongues and jumping around, but they also say it's a really beautiful journey. Yeah. And if you had to put, some words to describe what Acacia does, what does it do different than anything else?
Well, so the DMT molecule, works different than the iboga molecule or the psilocybin molecule. They all have, again, some similarities in terms of how they're going to go to work on your brain, but also some differences in terms of they are different molecules. To me, Acacia, well, let's say it this way. Psilocybin, the nickname is El Niños, right? The children, meaning that they can be very playful. Sure, we can get into deep water by taking, the higher and higher doses that can produce some more challenging, more difficult journeys than are typically associated with psilocybin. But generally speaking, psilocybin is softer. It is gentler. To me, ayahuasca is way more primitive. Like it has been in that jungle for thousands of years and been used for thousands of years. So it has, to me, it has this primal, primitive type of energy to it when you are in it, that it feels very primitive, right?
I heard that you see primitive figures, and that has been common across most experiences where people see the same set of community of primal figures. Is that true?
Yeah, and one of the common themes is that people will see it as either a jaguar, an anaconda, or a woman, a Latin woman will kind of appear.
Really?
And she'll be speaking to you, and it's whether it's the jaguar or the anaconda or the woman, that it's evident that you're talking to the spirit of ayahuasca. And that's the other thing too. Like I firmly, and I mean firmly, believe that these molecules are also entities, if you will. Like good entities, like on the level of angelic in my mind. Like that's how I see them. And so, yeah, I've had conversations. I've worked, like I go into it in the book, but if you want, I'll give you kind of the first time I ever saw her, if you will. Yeah. So this was my second ayahuasca retreat. I had the first. This shaman had told me I was a shaman. I pretty much discounted that, said, yeah, no. It kept kind of hounding me and chasing me down, so to speak. The universe, things kept happening where I was making peace with maybe it was true. So I decided to go to another ayahuasca retreat to get clarity. And ayahuasca, this woman showed up in my journey. And she was essentially training me on a task and then asking me to perform it. So, for example, she taught me to astral project that night. And so, the ability to like leave my body and to go to different places in the universe. And she took me to all these different locations, right? And then brought me back to my body. And then essentially I saw the other people in my group suffering, but knew from the night before that I wasn't going to be allowed to get up out of my seat and tend to them, right? And so I astral projected to them. And so the takeaway for me later was I always wear a cap, right? Because my dad has skin cancer and I don't want skin cancer. But I couldn't find my cap, and I was reaching around, fumbling. Finally, I found it, and I pulled out the cap I was wearing in that ceremony, and it wasn't the gray stocking cap that I was wearing. It was a Green Beret. And I heard the words, "You passed." And I was like, "What? You passed? What?" Again, and a third time, like with definitiveness, like, "You passed, dummy." And
like as a test.
Yeah. And like she had like one of the selections I went to in the military for a tier 1 unit was teach you a block of instruction, and then days or weeks later asking you to perform that task, right? And it was like very much like that. And I was like, oh, like I had this like light bulb moment where I was like, oh, you were teaching me to see if I could pick it up and what I could then go and perform it. And it all made sense. And then I had that hat in my hand, and it appeared as a Green Beret. Then I had the light bulb moment, and I looked back, and it was back to being a knit cap. So that's Aya. To me, acacia it's working on the same family of molecules. So the results are very similar, but it's also, to me, it's not as primitive as Aya. She's more, in my estimation, she's more futuristic. She's softer. People tell me that she's softer than ayahuasca. And I would agree with that. In fact, before I ever served my first acacia, drop of acacia, like my mentor had given it to me, had given me the acacia and said, it essentially comes in two ingredients that have to be taken separately. So he gave me bottle 1, and there was a 1 on top of it, and he gave me bottle 2 on top of it in marker, Sharpie, and wrapped in a napkin with instructions on it from like a cloth, or a paper napkin from the restaurant we were eating at. He put it in my hand. He said, follow these instructions and get back to me when you're done. Whether he was considering working with me or not, right?
So you had to do it on your own?
I did it on my own, yeah.
By yourself?
I do a lot of journeys on myself, actually, yeah.
Wow.
So
what was that like?
It was incredible. Like it was as good, if not better than ayahuasca. But I also recognized that I was biased, right? Like this is just me. And so I gathered a number of my friends who had done ayahuasca and who had been instrumental in helping me early in this space and said, listen, I have this new medicine. It's called acacia. And them going like, what? I'm like, it's similar to ayahuasca. And I'd like you to be my guinea pigs. Would you be willing to go through a ceremony for you? And the whole intention is for you to provide me some objective feedback on whether or not you feel like this is anywhere near ayahuasca for you. And every single person was like, oh yeah, no, this is as good, if not better. So, and a lot of them were saying that about it being softer and gentler. You still get the purge, there still is that, but sometimes that ayahuasca purge, it feels like something's reached in and grabbed a hold of your guts and is just yanking it out,
Yeah.
It can be violent purging.
I wanted to ask you a question because I thought about this when I was in Africa, and I went down this rabbit hole where I got into, like we typically do whenever we're overseas, like the culture and tradition. And I was in Niger, and I had bounced between Chad, Nigeria, and Niger, and I was interested in African antiquities. So much so that I thought it was real cool. Like I found a local guy who was making tapestries, making them out of homemade dye, breaking up the chalk and then putting it in the water and then painting these beautiful tapestries. So I bought a whole bunch of them. And of course, the Asian in me, the Korean in me turned it into a business. And I had a consignment, African antiquities consignment shop in Colorado Springs, which is pretty liberal. And it was really popular. My shop was actually pretty popular in that consignment warehouse of shops. And I would buy antiquities and then ship them back and then sell them on consignment. And my whole idea was like fair trade. I wanted to pay these people what they deserve to be paid versus what the local economy was paying you. I talked to this group of people, including a couple that had written a book on African antiquities. And it was rumored, I saw on some forums, old forums, that they had a warehouse in Colorado full of antiquities. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so I messaged them, and they came back to me and said, yeah, the whole thing's a scam. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, African antiquities, for the most part, generally speaking, especially in this part of Africa, Central Africa, is something that was created for Western civilization, for Europeans, the French, the British, Americans, tourists. And a lot of the things that they had in that warehouse were not old, not used in their culture or traditions or ceremonies. It was just created for a black market or a market of convincing Americans and Westerners that this was a thing. And I was like, what? And he gave me an example of like this game that's played by the Africans. He goes, there's this beautiful wooden hand-carved versions of it. They never would play with that. He said that was created for the white man because he would buy it and think it's beautiful and he would put it on his mantle. Their version of it was basically a palm grove that was just chopped up and scraped, and it was nothing that you would ever display as an antiquity. Yeah. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so we had talked about just prior to the show, and I want to get your opinion on this. When I hear, just like with yoga, because I know the yoga scam. I've dated women that were yoga instructors, and there's a whole, you don't see Indians doing yoga. Right. they don't do it, at least not in the idea that you think of it. Sure. But you'll see like the shaman or the guy in charge with all the white girls doing it. How much of this can we tie to actual traditions versus, because even in Mexico, which the team was great at the Mission Within, there's nothing I'm saying that even is remotely tied to this, because they were very modern. They weren't doing old Mexican traditions. They weren't pretending like it was a Latin American tradition. But I do fear that some of this has been presented to the Western world almost like a commercial. And I don't know how many, probably on one hand I can count, especially women who have told me, you have to experience this. You go to Peru and you go in the woods and you know it's real rudimentary and it's pretty primal, but it's a amazing experience. And I'm thinking to myself, do they do that in Peru in the woods? Mm-hmm. You know this? Do you understand the question? Yeah. I'm like, I'm afraid some of it is a scam.
Yeah.
But I know some of it's not. Have you been able to delineate and confirm that, okay, look, this has been used in oral tradition, written down in history?
Yeah. So, I mean, I haven't personally confirmed that, but I have read, I think, a fair amount of, books and articles and things like that, as well as following. Like I'll give you an example. There's a organization out there called the Chacruna Institute, and chacruna is the leaf that holds the DMT, which is one of the two main ingredients in ayahuasca, or yahe in the Colombian term. So a number of organizations like that I follow, that I feel fairly versed in it, enough to say that I believe that both of those things are true. Meaning, like, if you go to Peru, you probably can't walk 100 meters from the airport without a shop that's trying to sell you ayahuasca. Or people who are trying to take you to, a quote unquote shaman or whatever. And there's a ton of bad actors out there. Like, this is the problem. Like part of the problem is here in the United States, or most Western civilizations or countries that have made it illegal, by creating a black market around it, because now the demand is still there, especially with the growing evidence, right? Like, even the VA now is studying it, and Colorado is looking at like a government-ran, state-ran program to deal with mental illnesses and addiction. Texas is leaning way forward. So until we get to a decriminalized space, the demand is there. The demand is not going to go away. And so, therefore, if we don't make it, above board white market, then it has to come from the black and gray markets. And in that space is where bad actors thrive, which is part of my, like, any time a politician looks me in the face and says, Matt, we just can't legalize this because of it's too dangerous, really. I'm like, well, you clearly don't understand economics or danger or psychedelics. But yeah, so there's, and even in countries where, like Peru and Colombia, where it exists legally, there's still bad actors. And so I have a whole list of, like, kind of what I call the red flags about, choosing where you should go to go do this. So yeah, there is that catering to the white man, demand, greed, chasing the dragon sort of experience that is out there. Absolutely. But is there well-documented traditions that go way back? Yes, there are as well. The Taita that I visit, I took a gentleman down there that I took a group, like the last time I was down there, I took a group of men, and one of the guys had journeyed with me in the past. Well, two of them had, but this comment comes from one of them. He's like, yeah, bro, like, you need to maybe, like, only take people down here who are experienced, because this is the deep end of the pool. And what I mean by that is, like, it's 2 days just of travel just to get to the location where you're going to do the medicine. Because we fly into Colombia, then we fly into the remote part of the jungle, then we get in a van and we get dropped off, and then we got to hike, we got to, get on this trail and hike into the jungle. And so it is, to me, very in keeping with what I would call like the Yahe or ayahuasca traditions that go back thousands of years.
Yeah. And
I do know, from just my working with this man, with Taida, that, it goes back 5 generations on that land with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like he never had a formal education. He did ayahuasca the first time, I think it was at 6 years old. He's been drinking ayahuasca for over, probably 55, almost 60 years.
Wow.
So for on those levels, I do feel very confident. And the same thing with the psilocybin. I mean, like, here's a chance for me to plug, Maria Sabina. Maria Sabina was a Mexican shaman, and she introduced, I forget the guy's name. I always forget it, which is kind of, in a way, deliberate because I'm not a big fan of his. But in the 60s, a gentleman wrote an article for Life magazine. He had heard about magic mushrooms, right? And he decides to go down, him and his wife. He was an investment banker / hobbyist journalist type of guy. And he goes down to write this article for Life magazine. And he goes from shaman to shaman to shaman. And they're all like, no, thank you, Whitey. Move along. Until he met Maria Sabina. And Maria Sabina, she talks about it. She talked about, feeling compelled and she checked in with her guides and her process and felt like, I need to share this medicine with this man. And he ended up writing this article, became very famous, gave a lot of lectures, author, made a great deal of money from it. And she died penniless and broke, and outcast from her community for having shared that medicine. But that's another fine example of where those traditions resided and where they were kept and where they were protected. So to me, I have, I guess, a great deal of respect and love for Maria Sabina, because if it were not for her, I mean, eventually we would have, somehow the universe would have still put psilocybin in our laps. But she was very instrumental in propelling this forward in the 60s and the 70s. So yeah, I hold a lot of respect for her, and she was the one that held those traditions as well.
Mm. When you say on your book, underneath the title, it says From Green Beret to Shamanism, it says one man's journey to heal. Is the personal journey for you foundationally on your journey to figure out what was wrong with you because you were broken? You felt like you were broken. What were you healing, and what was the purpose of not just the book but the journey for you that you were led on?
That's a great question. I think that originally the journey really was just about my PTSD, which at the time I wasn't even willing to admit I had it when I got arrested. And that was part of that discovery process, is like really like accepting the fact that, okay, I have a mental illness. I would say now that it wasn't just PTSD. I mean, my knowledge on the subject has evolved quite a bit. I think that more of us suffer from moral injury more so than PTSD. Mm. But no, it was a journey to unfuck myself, basically.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I came out of that jail knowing two things. Like, A, I'm not being honest with myself about my, I guess, this severity of my mental illness and my struggle with addiction and alcohol and anger and rage and all these things. But secondly, I knew I had to do something differently, because I kept doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, obviously, which doesn't work. And so really it was just me going down this path of trying to like figure out like some of the more basic shit in life. Like, how is one happy? Like, how do I get happy again? Like, how do I get over this? Like, how do I stop using and abusing alcohol and all the things? And it just started there. the one man's journey to heal. So you're right. Like from Green Beret is part A. It basically goes from birth down to the arrest. And then part B is to shamanism, which is those 4 apprenticeships. And then part C is one man's journey to heal, which is essentially me trying in the best way I know how to articulate all the things. It's the lessons learned. That's what that is. It's the lessons learned about me crawling my way out of that abyss, 1 inch at a time and figuring this out, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, why, and being able to say it to men like us. You know what I mean? Nothing against a lot of people in this community, in the spiritual community, but in fact, I was having a conversation today with a colleague of mine who I just love and trust her so much. She's one of the best people in this space I know. And I talked to her about, like, sometimes in our ceremonies, guys like us can be very loud, very, like all that aggression and rage comes out sometimes, right? And that's not something that I shy away from. And she was saying, like, that is a whole new paradigm for me. I've never even seen or heard that, right? And so for me, I guess I look at it as like, in the same respect, I'm trying to articulate things in the book as well as perform shamanically in a way that resonates with guys like us. And that's what I was telling her. I was like, I know you don't understand that, but guys like me need a guy like me. And that's not to sound, to pat myself on the back. It's just saying, like, a lot of times I feel very comfortable in that space working with these, with guys like us. It just resonates for me. And so in the same, the part 3 of that book is to try to articulate some of this spiritual new age woohoo stuff in operator speak, in ways that guys like us would understand it and not be so resistant to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think I would have did the hero dose of psilocybin unless it was you, because I just don't trust being that vulnerable without having, like, a teammate or battle buddy.
Yeah.
Same thing with I began in 5MEO. I had Punky and Tyler, a career Marine who was in Fallujah, a SEAL team E9. It's like having those guys there where literally they were punching bags. I mean, guys coming out of 5MEO and having some kind of visceral and very physical response, they ended up being pin cushions for these guys. I think that's super important. And it's what's interesting is, like, this world, even in the book that you're talking about, it's very different. It's like convincing an operator to do yoga.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't gel well when, the guy in charge of Bikram comes in and he's talking about all of these, that was a big scam, but there's a whole bunch of elements that he's talking about where it's like you're totally disinterested. Yeah. But if you come at it and you're like, hey, look, this just changed my life, it's like, oh, well, you're an operator too, and you're saying it changed your life, and I listen to subject matter experts. And your entire life, technically, you go to a school to get taught by the SME, and then you get a little bit of that love that you put in your hip pocket, and then you move on. Yeah. To be the jack of all trades. And it's the same thing with this. It's scary because it's such not a convoluted world, but seemingly it's such a scary experience because no man who served in the military, period, wants to be vulnerable and exposed to his weaknesses.
Oh, no. And you bring up a really good point too, is that, psychedelic space, ceremonies, they come with risk. Like, let's be honest. Now, are they safe? Yes. Nobody has ever died from ayahuasca, acacia, LSD, MDMA, psilocybin, iboga, if the safety protocols are followed. Like, I'll give you, for instance, right? Like, well, here's a metaphor. Like, if I go out and have 10 drinks in an hour and get behind the wheel of my car, was it the alcohol that killed me, or was it the kinetic, the kinetic stop that killed me, right? I mean, there's contributing factors, and it's kind of the same way with ayahuasca. There was this famous church, they're no longer in operation, thank God, down in Florida, and they had a death, which is one of the contributing factors to why they shut down. But it wasn't the ayahuasca that killed the participant. The participant wanted his journey over, and they didn't have enough facilitators to participant ratio. There weren't enough safety officers on the range, so to speak, right? And so he locked himself in a bathroom and thought if he could just flush his system, it'd be over, right? And instead, he just flushed all the electrolytes out of his body and internally drowned. Like sometimes when kids at basic training are made to drink without electrolytes, right? So it wasn't the ayahuasca that killed him. It was how he was dealing with it. So yes, psychedelics are safe, but the danger in my mind, again, are some of these predatory facilities, as well as what you're doing in the space immediately following, and then the 30 days after. Because again, like I even told you, I think there were some things bouncing around in your head about possible collaboration. I said, yeah, let's talk about that 30 days post because I knew you were going to go back into ibogaine too. So I said, let's talk about that after ibogaine, because it would be completely unethical of me to put my interests into that mix of that highly suggestive space, right? And so there are risks involved. I want to be clear about that. There are risks involved, but by and large, they're very safe.
Is there I've heard you say it. I've heard other people say it that I've talked to in this space that have said, for example, like the guys who've done ibogaine, most of them have done ibogaine because they've basically circled the drain in some form or fashion. And I hate that, because that seems to me like planning for the worst case scenario and then waiting until the worst case scenario to implement change, right?
Yeah.
And so it seems very counterintuitive and not very proactive to get ahead of it, as like, hey, you don't necessarily. It's interesting, because when I went there with the 5 other participants, 6 total, I was like, yeah, I got trauma, but it's nothing compared to these people, including 3 civilians that went with me. My whole thing is like, guys on active duty right now, civilians, period, no matter what they're going through, they don't have to circle the drain to potentially get into this. What is the criteria for somebody to actually say, yeah, this looks like something for me as a protocol, or as something that I'm going to try to help improve?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think the answer runs the gamut. So for instance, there's another great book out there that I recommend for everybody called The Immortality Key. And The Immortality Key was written by a lawyer who basically had this burning question about psychedelics' role in society throughout history. So he made the conscious decision never to do psychedelics so that he could remain objective and not be criticized, of just being another cheerleader for it, right? And in that book, he talks about how psychedelics have been central to like every great civilization and all of their contributions throughout history. So like you talk about like, the Pythagorean theorem, or art, democracy coming out of, the Greeks and the Romans, philosophy, the Egyptians. And that one, the reason I bring that example up is because one of the problems of those examples is that at the time they were reserved for the elite. Like for example, the Egyptians would take their version of the psychedelics, right? And then they would piss them out. And at the time, like there's evidence of this, the servants would gather that piss and take it because the harmalines and the alkaloids were still in there, right? Just actually super concentrated. Even like the Sami people in like northern Scandinavia, an indigenous group of people, right, who work with reindeers. Like that's how one of the ways that they harvest it. It's like one of the psychedelics on my bucket list is they would feed psychedelics to reindeer, then collect the reindeer piss and then drink it. And so, sorry, way down a tangent on that one. But my point
I'm
is,
seeing a trend here.
but it was, in some respects, it was reserved for the elite, right? Like it was a special club. Like, welcome to our special club of elitists. We're going to introduce you to psychedelics throughout history. And then now it's seen more as, like you say, this last ditch effort. Like I don't know how many people I can tell you have reached out, and like I've had one guy, more than one guy, that have said, like, literally, Matt, like this is my last option. If this doesn't work, I'm out of options, right? But to me, the answer is somewhere in the middle, right? Like I believe that in theory, psychedelics are meant for everybody, but in practicality, not everybody. There's some people it's just not going to align for. It may not work for. It might just be like my wife is one of them. My wife has no desire to ever do any of it. And, you know, years ago, I dropped that, right? I'm not going to try to convince her or persuade her. But in theory, I think everybody can stand to gain something from it. Another way I look at it is like, think of it as your checking account. If you're $5,000 overdrawn, that's the circling the drain. That can get you back up to flush, right? But then there's people who just want to put money away in their 401k. And that's about the expansion, the spirituality of it. You may not always be processing as much trauma and addiction and different things, but you may have had the first couple of experiences, got back up to flush, you know, moving in a new direction. You're using neuroplasticity to establish those better practices and better habits. And now you just want to do it for the expansion that you gain from it as well.
I can't get over the pee. That's a legitimate thing, huh?
It's a legitimate thing, yeah.
Because it's processed, and I imagine it's distilled.
Exactly.
And that trace element is still in there.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your book. It comes out November 15th.
11th, actually.
Oh,
Yesterday.
11th.
Yeah.
Oh, it came out yesterday? It came out on Veterans Day.
Yeah.
Was that on purpose?
It was, because 2017 was my first Veterans Day post-military service, post my retirement.
Yeah.
My life was shit at the time. I was on the verge of yet another divorce. I was really struggling with the transition from, like, you know what it's like, man. Like one day you're covered with merit badges everywhere, and, you've got this rank and this career and this reputation, and you've been in SOF units for 20 plus years, and I deployed 40 months. And on Monday I was hanging out in cargo shorts and a t-shirt wondering who the hell I am, like in Utah. Like I didn't even have a military base or military community that could absorb me. I'm in this suburb, and nobody gets me. Nobody understands me. My wife's divorcing me. I'm an alcoholic. So Veterans Day 2017, I left the house with a bottle of sleeping pills and a weapon, and my intention was to end my life. And two things happened. I wound up in this bar in this little podunk town. The bar is called The Notch. I'll throw it out there. I'm not promoting it. I don't promote alcohol, but it's on the very edge of a U.S. forest, national forest.
In Utah?
Yeah, it's in Camas.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised they got a bar in Camas. I guess out of all places, they would have the bar in Camas.
Yeah, it's tiny. But like the night I was in there, it was literally like maybe 6 patrons, the bartender and a waitress, and then this reggae band. And
in the middle of Camas.
I know, yeah. See, like, if you know Camas, you're just like, what is this?
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing. I was in this bar the whole time going like, these two things do not go together. Like, we're in this total hick bar on the edge of a national forest, and there's this reggae band from California playing. And two things kind of happened with that band. The first was just like watching them and their energy and like going like, damn, there are happy people out there, you know? And then the second thing is they took an intermission and they just said, hey, you know, it's Veterans Day weekend, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our veterans and our veteran community and giving us the freedoms that we have. And I can get chills saying it right now, you know, but it was just like, it just brought tears to my eyes. I was like, what is happening? Like what is happening? I couldn't compute, right?
Yeah.
And so the bartender that night just said, hey man, like, what's your plan? Like, what are you doing? You know, I'm like, I said, I don't know. He's like, well, I'd feel better if you would sleep it off. He was the bar owner. He's like, I'd feel better if you just slept it off in my parking lot. So I did. He
was concerned about you.
Yeah, I'd had way too much to drink.
Yeah.
Way too much. I'd been in there all night.
Wow. Shut
it down at 2 a.m., you know, and he's like, just sleep it off. You'll be okay. I don't have a problem. So I slept it off. And then the next part of the story is I somehow wound up in Moab. All I remember is like waking up that morning pretty early and just driving. The next thing I knew, I was in Arches National Park. And it was an all day event. Like, I was there towards the end of the day, and the sun was going down, and I just pulled off to one of the pullouts in the park and sat there and watched the sunset. And what I tell people was that was the first time in a real long time, maybe the first time ever, where I felt like, okay, maybe there is a God. Like the sunset, that park, everything, just like, wow. Like, okay, maybe there's a God. And so somehow I got through that weekend, I guess is my point, right? And so now I go back to Moab every year with a group of veteran friends, and we just celebrate being alive.
I love Moab, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Moab too.
Good energy.
And that's why I can change the energy of the past. Like, we all can. Like, that's a shamanic principle, right? Like, the past doesn't exist, the future exists. The only thing that exists right now is the now. And in the now, like, and this is one of the things I love too. I gave a speech last year at this energy conference in Tucson, Arizona, and the name of the speech was How Modern Science Validates Ancient Shamanic Practice. And so now as quantum mechanics and string theory and all these, you know, these astrophysicists and whatnot study time, they're saying like, actually, you know, what you're doing right now still affects the past. So it may not change the events of the past, but it can certainly change the energy of the past. So yeah, I was in Moab this weekend, having a good time, and chose that day to release the book so as to change the energy. And also it's the anniversary of my close brush with suicide.
Crazy, man. It's crazy how many guys from our world who are so resilient have that similar story to that. I was going to ask you a question that slipped my mind, but I was going to ask you also what your recommendation for somebody who's listening to this podcast who might be going through a difficult time. Like, there's obviously the nonprofits. They're completely saturated, obviously, because there's a lot of people in desperation. It's not just military veterans. It's civilians as well. If somebody wanted to start kind of their own journey to see if this is for them, what would be your recommendation or your tips to have them start the process?
And by this, you mean starting psychedelics for this process?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. And this part is super tricky. Like, I admit this. It's not easy because you really need to find a trusted source. You know what I mean? And so there's ways around that. There's ways you should do that. And actually, if I may, what I'll do is I'll tie this into the earlier comment about like the red flags, right? Like some of the things that I think that are red flags in this space, like if you're working with anybody, you know, shaman, facilitator, whatever, and, you know, you say, well, can you tell me about like the medicine and what I'm taking and things like that? Any sort of like, ooh, ancient shamanic secret or, you know, like that, I think that's a red flag. You should know, you should have complete knowledge about what you're putting in your body. I think that you should also be able to ask for references and referrals, right? Like, let me read your references, but also give me a list of names of people I can call that you're okay with me having a one-on-one conversation with. I think you need to be able to ask about their safety protocols. I think that there should be an intake form and an intake call. And like, what are they doing? We keep a medic in the room every ceremony. Do we need one? No, probably not. You know, it's probably one of those things I could probably get away with, but I'd rather err on the side of caution. So we keep a medic in the room no matter what. And so if you can kind of work through that process, what I would recommend is probably starting with a real low dose of psilocybin, just to, and this is one of the reasons that we do things a little differently. Like we'll do psilocybin on night 1 and acacia on night 2. And the reason for that is because for a lot of guys like us, again, you know, we went into the military at a pretty young age, which meant that we probably missed out on a lot of the sort of like exploratory drug use, you know, and things like that, because we were always worried about a urinalysis or whatever, right? And so fair enough. So, you know, I've had to approach this space as a 50-plus-year-old man now, right? Like when I first happened, I was, you know, I was at 50 essentially, and so it feels like a lot of catch up, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just getting that sort of common knowledge base that was so foreign to me. And so in that same light with guys like us, like we start you off on night 1 in psilocybin just so that you can say, here's your crawl walk space. Here's your crawl walk space. Get a little familiar with it. See that it's not exactly, you know, what you thought it might be. Like understand how you can kind of work with it, et cetera, et cetera. And then on night 2, go into the deep end of the pool with the acacia. So in that same respect, I'd still kind of recommend to a lot of guys out there to start at that shallow end of the pool with, you know, with a low dose of psilocybin and somebody that you can really trust to trip sit for you so that you can kind of get a feel for it and begin to understand it and see that it's and I promise this, full stop period. It's not what you think it is. Not in a good way or a bad way. It's just that, you know, there's this word that goes around in this space a lot. It's ineffable, I think it's INEFFIBLE, right? And it simply means there are no words for it. In fact, the metaphor that I use is the Grand Canyon, right? Have you been to the Grand Canyon? Like, could you, from looking at it from like, say, a photo on a calendar to experience it, how dramatically different is that?
Night and day.
Night and day,
Yeah.
right? That's ineffable. Standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon is ineffable. Like for somebody who hasn't been to the Grand Canyon, I literally don't have the words to describe it. It's this natural phenomenon that there's no words for. And that's psychedelic space too. So no matter what your expectation is, the first time you see the Grand Canyon, it'll be different than what your expectation was. So I do strongly encourage that, you know, whether it's your first ceremony or an experimentation, that you kind of leave all of your expectations at the door. Just let it go. Just let it be what it's going to be. And that's the other thing too, is it is really different for everybody. Everybody's going to have a different experience. And that's, I think, part of its value.
Yeah, that for me is what brought profound introspect And also, this is the last question I remembered. Last question is on that subject matter, where a lot of people I've seen, when confronted with, especially Christians will say, this is black magic.
Yeah.
This is the devil. And I'm very taken back by that, because for my experience in every way, it's brought me closer to God, because I am for sure a Christian. I do preaching to the choir on this podcast every Sunday, and it's only reinforced my faith in very significant and deep ways. Have you ever seen the evidence that there's darkness related to black magic or to any kind of experiences in that? And then how would you articulate what that is versus what it's not? I mean, I know I've heard people relate it to, like, it's like hell, it's like purgatory, it's like the devil. And it's obviously aligned with their confirmation bias via their faith. But how would you define it?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. And the same, man. It kind of leaves me dismayed and bewildered and frustrated at times when, like, it feels like the only card that some of these people have, which isn't even it's not it's just anecdotal. It's not empirical evidence to the demon idea, right? And black magic and all that stuff. It's frustrating because, again, like, the majority, well, I'll say it this way. I've had nearly every faith come through my retreats, right? Maybe not Jehovah's Witness, but, Mormon, Catholic, Protestant, Buddhist, Islam, Jew, like and every single one of them has left as they came, right? So first of all, there's that. And not only did it not change their faith, but that's also to the contrary, to show that these just amplify your beliefs. They don't funnel you into a particular belief, right? It just, it amplifies the good. But to your question about, like, how I would articulate the darkness, because, again, like I said, there are bad actors in this space. There are bad actors who will use that power of suggestion that you're left in immediately following in the 30 days after for their own agendas. Like, oh, I'm the only healer that can see you, and only I know how to work with this, this thing that you have. You have an attachment, you have an entity, and only I can see it, and only I can fix it. Well, yeah, motherfucker, because you're the one that put it on this person, like, yeah. So I look at it like this, like, the medicines are like, like an M4 or like a hammer or anything like that. I can use that hammer to build shelter for, homeless veterans, or I can use that hammer to, destroy something as well. So the medicine is neutral. It comes down to who and how is serving it, and their intention behind it, and your intention behind it, ultimately. But like one of the things, and you may recall, but, like, I'll pray before and after every ceremony, and in those prayers I will mention that there is only love and light in this container and in this ceremony. And I will put out my spirit guards to protect that as well, to ensure that there's only love and light in our ceremonies.
And that's all. My ceremony was all love and light.
Yeah.
I mean, it was nothing but that.
Yeah. So it is intention. And so, again, please do your homework on who you're going to sit with. And I'm not suggesting by any means that the only person you should ever sit with is me. There's a lot of really great facilitators out there, but I think that it needs to be a really good fit for both. Like, we screen both ways, meaning, like, the people coming to sit with us, hopefully they're screening us based on our procedures, and then we're screening them. We have a 3-system screen process. Like, we're screening them physically based on the intake form. We're screening them psychologically, because there are a couple of, and this comes back to is it right for everybody? In theory, yes. In practicality, no. Like I'll give you a couple for instances. Like it's widely held that people with dissociative ID disorder, multiple personality, or schizophrenia are not real good candidates for this, right? Because you can trigger like permanent psychosis. Okay.
Locking them in.
Yeah, exactly. So we screen for the physical suitability, psychological suitability, and shamanic suitability. Like, do I have the right feeling over this person after doing my meditation on it as well? So no, there's definitely those things in there, but if they are, it's because the facilitator or the shaman has put them in there, to be honest with you. Because the other name for these medicines is entheogens, and that just means the sacred plants. And I like DMT, for example, is called the God molecule. Like I had it, and I'm so glad you brought this up. There's a friend of mine that owns a crystal shop about 2 miles from here, and they were really, really good friends and mentors to me when I first got into this spiritual space. And they posted something on social media a couple of weeks ago, maybe more like a month now, that basically said, that same thing, right? That this is full of darkness and demons and all this stuff. And they were reposting from another influencer, right? Mm-hmm. And he was so contradictory in what he was saying. Like, first of all, there was no facts. It was all opinion. Second of all, he had an opinion that he immediately countered. Like he said, like, don't get me wrong. Like, it really made me present in the moment and things like that. But, it's also this and this and this. I'm like, well, it can't be. It's like, it's one or the other, right? But I had a conversation with them after they posted that, and I felt like, my comment to them was, essentially, you're doing harm by putting this out there. Because if somebody is in that hole, in that abyss, they can't get themselves out. I'm the first one to say, like, I don't believe plant medicine or psychedelics are the silver bullet. They are not. They're a great bullet, but not a silver bullet, right? But if somebody, and one of the ways where I feel like they're particularly effective is in the expediency space, right? Like, again, guys like us, we don't always, and guys like us who find themselves, like you said, in that I'm circling the drain and this is my last option space, they usually don't have a year to master meditation and breath work, right?
Yeah.
That'll still get you to that same space, but you may not have a year to do it. Well, guess what? Give me one weekend. Mm-hmm. Give me one weekend, and I'll at least be able to show you the reality that God exists, at a minimum, and hopefully that gives you some hope. But yeah, there are bad actors in this space, but not by nature. Again, these plants are of God in my mind. They're nothing but of God. Any psychedelic I've ever done has moved me closer to God in the experience every single time.
Yeah.
Bar none.
Great answer, man. Matt Butler, from Green Beret to Shamanism. Thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, bro.
You got anything last minute you want to put out? You got anything new that you're doing? Instagram post? Yeah,
just follow me. It's helpful if you guys follow me on social media, simply because 100% of the proceeds of the book go to the nonprofit. So we are a church. We get to practice from a place of belief. So that's why I said in the beginning, sometimes it's medicine, or more appropriately called sacraments. Mm-hmm. So these are our sacraments, and we get to practice that under the First Amendment and the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act. But we formed a church in order to do that, and then along with that came a nonprofit. And so from that place, the proceeds of the book and following us on social media and anything like that all goes back into the church so that we can provide ceremony to veterans who can't afford it as well. Because occasionally we get those cases where somebody will say in their intake call, well, that all sounds well and good, but I need to get disciplined and save the money until I can come out there in a year maybe. And like that's just not who we are. Like if somebody's circling the drain, like you said, then let's get them into ceremony as soon as possible. And so, yeah, that'll help fund that as well.
Awesome, man. And you guys can get the link down below. Also, the link to his social media. I'll put all that stuff in the notes in YouTube and on Spotify. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast as well. Appreciate you, Matt.
Thanks. Appreciate you, Mike.
Thanks, guys.